Welcome to Deep Thought. History of the Four Races. Now, I'm gonna hit on something deep. Now, I'm not gonna really talk much from my own thought on this, but understand something. Many cultures, many indigenous cultures, divide the world's races up into four elements. One prominent one, and I have a link in the description box, are the Hopi, and they call it a will for I forgot the exact term, but they have an idea about this, and plus some other groups that I'll read in an excerpt, right? And I know the Negro in Africa, the tribe which the famous shaman Malidoma Somé came from. They see different groups as elements. And interestingly enough, it was explored in the idea of animation with Avatar: The Last Airbender and also The Legend of Korra, how they divided races up into four elements. And of course, each one had abilities based on those elements. But that's actually based on some real beliefs by many shaman, indigenous peoples, priests, and people in certain orders. Now, I spoke a lot about Master Yao and Yamache Morris and the work he's done, particularly with his books Awakening the Master Feminine and Awakening the Master Masculine. But there's a book they don't talk about as much he wrote. It's called A Natural Blueprint for Relationships, a Mumra Volume 2. And he talks about the history of the four races there. And it's a powerful thing because, one, it's like that type of knowledge that, Western science hasn't really outlined it. And then, you hear the we're all people, but, everybody's built to do a different thing, right? Everybody's built. Everybody has a purpose. So I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna read this for you, right? And we'll just leave it at that. Have a discussion about it. And I don't know if he has the copies of the Natural Blueprint for Relationships on sale anymore. I'm going to check. If I do, I'll have it in the description box. If I can't find it, well, he doesn't have it on sale anymore. Anyway, I'll start in the excerpt. The history of the four races. Before we can successfully read the map of where we are going, we need to gain a reference to where we are by going back and reviewing where we have been. I will begin this chapter by taking time to share a special wisdom with you. It's a very ancient thing, and even today, though the shroud of secrecy has been removed from it, few people speak of it, for it is hard for some to believe, harder for others to accept, harder still for others to accept. This is the history of how the current age of man began. I gained this knowledge by investigation and communion with spirits in the elemental realm and the ancestral realm. Other groups and individuals who acknowledge this history include, but are not limited to, the monks of the Shaolin Temple in China, priests from the Tao sect in Tibet, a Khan priest in Ghana, various shamans in Peru, including the sect connected to the author of the Celestine Prophecy, various medicine men in the Native American culture, including Medicine Chief Rolling Thunder, a very great Lakota Sioux holy man. A series of his lectures were carried on PBS radio back in the 90s. He has passed on. And various priests from many sects in West Africa. Moreover, many unique people whose insight I have grown to respect have probably confirmed this story. There is no proof that the information is true or valid, and it has not been documented. Perhaps the story will resonate with you, and perhaps it will not. There are, however, a host of others like myself who have come to know the same thing from our own source. The last people to publish part of the story on this continent were the Native American nation called the Hopi people. It is part of the Hopi Prophecies. And just to mention again, just to take a break from this, I have a link to that in the description box. Anyway, let me get back to it. Before them, the priest of the Dogon people of Mali told a portion of the story to reporters visiting them. Each version of the story is different in some respects. Some go into great detail and others present only an outline. All agree about the assignment of races to the same four elemental attributes. The version told here is my version of the story, however, it is not as it has been told by others such as the Dogon or the Hopi or the Shaolin. One important source of information about ancient cultures is through communion with ancestors who lived in them. Historical and archaeological information is used to confirm or revise what I have learned from the ancestors. Most of the written documents that support this thesis were written between 300 to 800 years ago before the European began his campaign to alter history. In the author's opinion, the sources of the most accurate information about ancient history are Arabic scholars, ancient Greek historians, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Chinese, and the Africans from Mali during the Songhay period. In all cases, the works had to be translated into English and unfortunately are today extremely rare. This is our story. About 13,500 years ago, the previous age of mankind came to an end and the current age of mankind began. The Egyptian, Assyrian, Mayan, Dogon, and Chinese ancient calendars placed the date at 11,542 BC. In a way of speaking, God harvested the old crop of human spirits and created new races of people for the next age. When this switchover occurred, the earth went through a series of convulsions, including earthquakes, volcanoes, and major shifts in the weather. The landmass of the earth shifted, with some land dropping beneath sea level and some land that was previously covered by the ocean rose above sea level. The convulsions concluded in massive flooding of the new land masses and the killing of 97 or 98% of human life. Let me pause here for a second. It's interesting when they say the massive flooding. Years ago, I remember me and my grandmother took me to a movie, and this was In Search of Noah's Ark. One interesting thing that came from the movie, they said virtually every culture on earth has some story about a flood. Virtually every culture, every mythology has some type of story about a great flood. So when you have something that goes across cultures, it's something happened. In the Christian Bible, a lot of stuff is allegory. Well, not allegory, but it's actually, it puts stuff in a certain way, but there was a lot of stuff that probably happened, but it was, it was put in such a way, I would say a right brain way. A lot of it's in code, I'll put it like that. Anyway, right? But that's one of the things that was talked about. Anyway, right after the calamity was over, God created four primary races at the time, these being the European race, the Asian race, the Native American race, and the African race. And then God called the new races to him and told them about the original teachings and how humanity will receive these again. God spoke to each and said, in time, I'm going to give you some teachings and you will call these original teachings. And when you come back together with each other, you will share those teachings so that you can share and have peace on the earth and a great civilization will come about. Then he said, during this cycle of time, I'm going to give each of you 2 stone tablets. When I give you some of those stone tablets, don't cast them upon the ground. Don't cast those upon the ground. Not only will human beings have a hard time, but almost the earth itself will die. After this, God relocated the 4 races to 4 regions on the globe. Each of these 4 races were given an affinity from one of the elemental forces. To the Native American, the red people were given an affinity to earth and the teachings of this element and power. To the Asian and yellow people of the Far East was given the affinity to air and the teachings of this element and power. To the Europeans of the North, the white people was given an affinity to fire and the teachings of this element and power. To the Africans, the black people were given the affinity to water and the teachings of this element and power. Racial attributes. There's a natural blueprint for life. God gave each race a set of attributes so that each race could complete a task. Part of this task is to infuse the original teachings of that element into life situations, to explore the facets that are contained within each of the elemental powers. Each race has the potential and inclination to bring forth specific portions of this blueprint. In this regard, each race has an affinity to certain elemental forces, certain social patterns, certain deities, and certain patterns of evolution. What follows is the outline of the attributes of the 4 races and how their elemental affinity has shaped their human development. The attributes and affinities of the yellow race. They have an affinity to the eighth sphere of the tree of life and the deities associated with that sphere, such as Sebek. Asian people are a yang people and not a yin people. They excel in the secretion of yang hormones versus the yin hormones. They function more from the left brain than the right brain. Asian people have an affinity to the planet Mercury, and their modality of life is government, writing, and record keeping. Asian people have an affinity to the air and the lungs, to oxygen and the wind, and to birds and flying things. They have an affinity to war, and many of their old cultures elevated the art of war to a ritual. They are the most fierce and martial of races, but their wars were more about pride and ego than the conquest of other people. They believe in a code of honor even towards their opponents. Their societies are ruled by strict codes of personal discipline and self-sacrifice. The teachings of the air have a lot to do with breathing, and the flow of the chi force. Therefore, Asian people have created many models of natural science which have to do with chi and the Tao, such as Tai Chi and Qigong. The Tao emphasizes development of the person through special breathing and purification of the chi. The forms of Buddhism, influenced heavily by Asians, emphasize meditation techniques that rely heavily on special breathing and chanting. While all races have developed forms of the martial arts, the Asian people have taken this to a higher height. Asians have been given the teachings of the air element, and the cultures they have developed show the influence of this. They are generally a precise people, reserved, honorable, disciplined, and artistic. In respect to the human race, it is Asian people who have developed the authentic models of government, writing, art, architecture, war, martial arts, and education systems geared towards the left brain. The attributes and affinity of Europeans. They have an affinity to the fifth sphere on the tree of life and the deities associated with that sphere, such as Hirokohuti, Ogun, etc. These are the gods of war, justice, and courage. Europeans are a yang people and not a yin people. They excel in the secretion of yang hormones versus yin hormones. They function more from the left brain than the right brain. Europeans have an affinity to the planet Mars. Their modality of life is economics. The white people have an affinity to the things of the fire elemental. These affinities include fire, electricity, firearms, weapons, and gunpowder. The refining of war through fire, metalworking through fire, hard liquor, baking and cooking, tobacco and smoking, ashes and slag. These people have a strong attraction to games of contests, certain types of mental challenges, and athletic sports. Europeans have been given the teachings of the fire elemental, but they have refused to receive all of these teachings. They have received the lower teachings, those dealing with technical things and the means to harness energy. They have harnessed these teachings mainly for war and economics. This is a violation of the original mandate of the Great Spirit. Europeans are not in harmony with their destiny and natural purpose. The higher teachings of the fire elemental have been received by European holy men in the past, but there have been no advanced civilization of Europeans through which these higher teachings could be received and refined. These teachings deal with the magic and healing power and transforming power of the fire elemental. Europeans are very charismatic, constantly seeking new excitement and stimulation, obsessed with communication. Once a number of them join together into a group, they develop a strong hive consciousness. In respect to the human race, it is Europeans who have developed the authentic models of physical technology. They have developed models of industry, systems of electricity, methods of refining which use fire and heat to refine metals, ores, oils, plastic, and rubber. They have developed authentic models of economics, trading, commerce, money systems, communications, legal codes, physical training, athletic contests, and transportation. These models have not reached their full spiritual potential, however, Europeans have not produced the higher version of these systems. By that I mean, most of these systems are still in their crude form. The higher aspects of the fire elemental teachings have not been incorporated into their society. The current models of fire technology are not sustainable. They are not designed to be compatible with natural patterns. Without refinement, current systems will burn themselves out in a few decades. The invention of the computer and computer technology has set the stage to bring the higher elements of these systems into being. But the profit motive and the corruption it brings must first be set aside for this to happen. Currently, Europeans are out of control. They have not gained the ability to regulate themselves. Not only are they destroying the fabric of their own society, they are doing immense harm to all others. Fire sustains itself by clinging to a source of fuel. Europeans too often look to others to provide the creativity and raw effort to power their society. They become trapped this way. They become parasites dependent on a host. Fire does not respect boundaries. As long as it can spread to a new field, it just keeps on growing and spreading, leaving destruction and desolation where it's been. If left uncontrolled in this way, it will destroy itself by consuming its environment too fast. The greatest problem of Europeans is their refusal to acknowledge and respect the rights and boundaries of others. When and if they bring forth an advanced civilization, the higher aspects of the fire teachings are probably manifest as these problems will diminish. The attributes and affinities of Native Americans. They have an affinity to the fourth sphere on the tree of life, and the deities associated with that sphere, such as Ma'at, the god of truth and law. The red people are yin people, not a yang people. They excel in the secretion of yin hormones. They function more from the right brain than the left brain. They have an affinity to the planet Jupiter. The modality of life is education and the creation of civilization. Native Americans are the most yin people of the four races, having an affinity for the earth. In direct contrast to the way Europeans have depicted them in history, Native Americans are people who love peace more than any other race. Native Americans have an affinity to the land, tree, plants, and herbs. They understand the animal kingdom in a way that is profound and have covered much wisdom useful to man through their communication with the animals. They are the most expert healers with plants and herbs of any of the four races. Native Americans were the first to refine agriculture to the point that it became viable to sustain a village. Long ago, Native Americans developed the natural sciences which show man how to live off the earth without consuming or harming it. These people could set up a village, reap an abundant harvest from the land, and leave the area in a year, better off than when they found it. Under their care, North America became an ecological paradise. When Europeans came to America, it was overflowing with wild herbs, deer, buffalo, and other wild game. Fruit trees, nuts, edible plants, and all manner of organic abundance. They have an affinity to the power of odors and aromatherapy, to carbon, to beer, to bread, and things made of grains, animal skins, and bones, caves, gems, minerals, stones, mud, the womb, and the family. They are people who are generous, social, and balanced. The organic symbol of their people is the spleen, and they have a strong constitution. Native Americans have been given the teachings of the earth elemental. As a consequence of this, they have developed the most complex form of civilization. The higher teachings of the earth elemental provided the social systems which enabled peoples with different philosophies, different economic classes, religions, tribes, and etc. to live in harmony in the same society. These cultures were probably the least technically advanced of all the high cultures, but perhaps the most civilized in a spiritual sense. In respect to the human race, it is the Native Americans who have developed authentic models of civilization, family life, environmental preservation, balance within the ecosystems, agriculture, and the human relationship to the animals, plants, insects, and mineral kingdom. They have developed highly evolved systems of alternative medicine which are practiced by a rare few today. We need these systems desperately. In the rainforests of the Amazon and the Rocky Mountain ranges, there are secrets of nature that are closely guarded. There are frogs, plants, insects, and minerals which have amazing healing and transforming powers. The Native American ancestors introduced some of this knowledge to the Voodoo culture, and it became a source of great power for this culture. With this knowledge, they have been able to heal and invoke magical power. The bulk of these ancient secrets, however, remain locked away. For example, the cures to AIDS, herpes, diabetes, and other chronic illnesses are locked away. Only a true Native American priest wielding the power of the earth elemental can unlock this power. The Native Americans have perfected systems of nomadic living, water management, recycling, renewable resources, land restoration, and more. They have also been successful in bringing forth the higher teachings of the earth elemental through their high cultures. The Inca, the Mayan, the Olmecs, the Hopi, the Navajo, the Sioux, the Algonquin, the Iroquois, and many other Native American cultural groups have made major contributions to the higher natural sciences. The destruction of major portions of the culture of Native Americans was a severe blow to the evolution of the entire human race. While this wisdom has not lost been forever, it is currently separate from the world because of the callousness and ignorance of Europeans. The attributes and affinities of the black race. They have an affinity to the seventh sphere on the tree of life and the deities associated with that sphere, such as Het-Heru, Venus, and Oshun. These are the gods of beauty, harmony, creativity, sensual pleasure, social systems, and love. Africans are a yin people and not a yang people. They excel in the secretion of yin hormones. They function more from the right brain than from the left. Africans have an affinity to the planet Venus and also the moon. Their modality of life is religion, spirit, and entertainment. The African race is a race of people with affinity to the water elemental. They are people of the spirit, of the rivers, and of the blood. They are people who are by nature have big hearts. Africans have an affinity to rivers and oceans, to boats and ships, sailing, to lubricants, to fish and water birds, to singing and dancing, to music and the power of sound, to the words of power, to wines and spirit drinks, to the moon and lunar cycles, to the semen and sexual organ, to the rhythm and poetry and things which makes thoughts flow, to the ethereal and spirit world, to sweat and urine, to libation and spiritual bath, to water plants, to rain and dew, and most especially to the blood and the heart. Africans have been given the teachings of the water elemental. In the wisdom of the water elemental teachings, there is great power because water is the medium of the spirit world, and water planets and water elements govern relationships. The strength of the African culture is its spirituality and the understanding of the inner workings of the human spirit. Through use of their natural science, there's no social, family, or community issue too difficult for the world to overcome. There's a much deeper meaning and wisdom embedded in all the affinities listed above. For instance, there's a profound connection between sound and the atomic structure of water. Singing is a deliberate manner can affect all the water molecules in the body of a human. The African has the power to heal and transform through voice alone. In respect to the human race, it is Africans who have developed the authentic models of religion and ritual, initiation systems for the cultivation of the spirit, healing of the spirit, astrology, cosmologies, the oracle systems, and communication with God in the other realms. They developed the natural archetype systems of people, the knowledge of the natural cycles, the social sciences, the natural sciences, systems of alternative medicine, and the natural wisdom of the DNA, blood plasma, and blood technology. They were the first to develop irrigation, indoor plumbing, water purification, marshlands technologies, burial technology, urban planning, natural models, spiritual architecture, and sustainable living. Africans have developed authentic education systems geared to the right brain, the occult sciences, shrines, fetishes, and talismans, iconic and subliminal language pottery. They have developed authentic models for male-female relationships, marriage, rites of passage, ancestral communion, and the advancement of the quality of future generations through natural selection models. More importantly, they were successful in bringing forth the higher teachings of the water elemental into ancient high cultures of Africa. Yeah. Well, I don't want to go too far with that. Just want to throw that out there. There's some deeper stuff with this because, people will listen to it and say, well, every group does that. Or it's one, a lot of the groups are more mixed now than they were, at first. People, and that's actually part of the whole plan. But also, there was a problem. A lot of stuff that was supposed to be done wasn't done, and that's a whole other conversation. But I just wanted to read that there. I'll see if I have a link. See if he's still selling the book, and I'll have that in the link. Anyway, just wanted to share that. I would say, I know some of it might sound crazy or weird or whatever. Open your mind. That's all I say. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.